And good afternoon, everyone. Dwayne here. Welcome to the Radical of Math. And today is the first video of maybe many, maybe a one-off, I don't know yet. But it revolves around a question that I was asked by one of you. And the question is, what would I recommend in a pre-calculus syllabus? Well, to answer that, we have to first answer what would be in an Algebra II syllabus. And so on the board, I've written the 6 things you must have in a successful Algebra II course. You can have more than this, but you cannot have less. Function as a concept, work involving first, second, and third degree functions, including conics, roots, exponentials, logarithmic, and rationals, the binomial theorem, complex numbers, and matrices and determinants. Just making sure my microphone was actually transmitting. Looks like it is. So let's go through each of these in brief. And if you see me looking off screen, I'm looking at my notes I've prepared here. And I'm going to do these kind of in a different order than presented. Because the binomial theorem stands on its own. Going through Pascal's triangle, learning about combinations versus permutations, calculating certain terms of an expansion. But the binomial theorem, critical in upper level mathematics. You see the binomial theorem come up quite a bit. So definitely crucial. Matrices and determinants revolve around solving systems of equations. And so you're looking at Cramer's rule, you're looking at the diagonalization rule of a 3x3, you're looking at the concept of minors. This definitely comes up in linear algebra, comes up in vector calculus, and other applications. So you definitely need to have some exposure to matrices and determinants. And then the last bit is kind of standing on its own, is complex numbers. And basically with complex numbers is when you start looking at the imaginary roots of a quadratic equation, and then you get exposed into cubic situations. But complex numbers are very important to be exposed to early, because when you get into the pre-calculus realm, you realize that the complex plane is a real thing and you can graph it. So students definitely need exposure to complex numbers. So those 3 things I would consider to be more of a secondary part of Algebra II. But the primary part of Algebra II is these 3 areas. Function as a concept, manipulating and being comfortable with equations, including conics, which I'm going to address in a moment, and then encountering the major classes of real number-based equations, eventually complex numbers, roots, exponentials, logarithmics, and rationals. So let's tackle the function as a concept one first, because it kind of sets up the other 2. And so the thing that we need to understand is you need to be familiar with domain and range. Some people use the word codomain. You may see that in the literature. And you should be exposed to the concept of end behavior. Now, those who have watched the channel know that I am very critical of the advanced placement pre-calculus exam because they rehash a lot of Algebra II concepts. Here's one of the big ones that they talk about, that they ask many questions about, that should be well understood by this point, is understanding the nature of a graph as x approaches affinity or negative affinity. That's a main thing. Absolute value. For sure. In the step function. So out of the step function, you have a floor, and then you have a ceiling. So let me put an E there. So you need to have familiarity with these concepts. Also, intervals and their notation. Those three big things you absolutely must master, you must have full grasp of. Because if you do not, what will happen is you're setting yourself up to really struggle when you start getting into items 2 and 3 here on the list. So let's get straight into that. So item 2, we're handling up to 3rd degree and in some cases 4th degree or quartic polynomials. So the thing is, polynomials. So one of the big things is finding zeros of polynomials. Your teacher may say roots. They're the same thing. And how to find them. So you have factoring, but you also have something called synthetic division. Critical concept in polynomials. Critical concept. These two really set you up for category 3. Zeros. The other thing I'm going to notice that I would bring your attention is how the graph. How do you graph these polynomials? Very, very important. Now, the reason why graphing is important is you need to know how to do a line, parabola. You need to do a cubic. And you need to do the conics, which a parabola is part of the conics. So it's the other 3 conics: circle, hyperbola, ellipse. Out of those 4 conics, for upper level math, you need to have intimate familiarity with all of them except the hyperbola. The hyperbola is somewhat more rare than the other 3. But you need to be able to graph these comfortably and figure out their zeros, their intercepts, and so forth. You also need to be able to multiply and divide and to manipulate. So, very, very important in the study of polynomials, because you can't model, you can't apply this until you have foundational knowledge. And then the third, and this is really, I think, the meat of Algebra II, this is really its core basis, is we have to talk about radicals. We have to talk about exponential, logarithmic, and rational. These are different types of functions. I am not one to use hyperbole, but this section right here will make or break you, not just in math, but also in science, and in a STEM major, definitely will break you. You have to be able to do these not just decent, you need to be proficient and able. Radicals are just your square roots and so forth. That's all that is. And I would strongly encourage you to be very comfortable with the different manipulations with radicals. There's some neat things that you can do with them. Exponentials. You're going to learn about a to the x, but you're also going to learn about e to the x. And if your Algebra 2 course does not have a good discussion about the number e and its inverse function, which is something that you should be familiar with from Algebra 1, but you're probably going to get covered again as part of function as a concept in Algebra 2. Your Algebra 2 course is deficient if it does not cover natural log and e to the x. Those two functions are very critical because exponential growth, exponential modeling, in calculus, you have a lot of work involving e to the x and ln x. This is something you need to be intimately familiar and comfortable with. And then rationals are just, your fractional expressions. And the thing about fractions is a lot of you are not comfortable with fractions. It's not in your wheelhouse. Algebra 2 will find you out very quickly if you are not good in fractions. So, those are my recommendations for an Algebra 2 syllabus. So I'm going to leave you with this one thought. In order to get the advanced placement pre-calculus right, we have to get the Algebra 2 right. With that, take care, everyone. Take care of yourselves and each other. God bless.